So I think what I want to spend most of my time on is the fact that the peace movement is probably at what we could say at a very weak point, at a low level, why that might be, and what we need to do to change that. Now, the first thing I would ask people is, when we say the peace and anti-war movement, what do we mean? Now, if we look back, I'm a co-chair of United for Peace and Justice, and I've been on the steering committee for quite some time. And there was a time when we could call a demonstration and 100,000 people would be small. And probably at the height of maybe February 15th, when the largest demonstration the world has ever known when it comes for peace all across the globe, there were hundreds of thousands of people in New York and hundreds of thousands of people in other places across the country. So there were millions of people across the globe that were out that day, February 15th. The last demonstration we called, which was April 4th of last year in New York City, we probably had 10,000. We could argue 30,000 people. But for New York City, which has a population itself of 10 million plus people, that's like, what's that, 0.01% of the population. So obviously that's minuscule. So why did that happen? So when I asked what is the movement, and people looking back on the past, I would challenge us to think about, were all the people that hit the streets, did they really see themselves as part of the peace and anti-war movement, or were they motivated by the politics of the moment? By that I mean, let's look at, for example, before September 11 happened and we began to build what we know of as the peace movement. There was a demonstration, I believe it was in April of 2001. It was called the March for Women's Lives. I believe it was in Washington, D.C., and I attended that. I don't remember how many people came out, but there were tens of thousands of people. It was a pretty big march. It was pretty impressive. One of the things that sticks out in my mind, I have a picture of it at home, is there was a U.S. flag, and there's two things that stick out. There was a U.S. flag, and there was a black silhouette of a woman with a coat hanger in the silhouette, and it looked like blood, to say, you know, it was about abortion, and this is what we can get back to, the coat hanger days. I liked the flag a lot. I was a little disturbed by that, but I was impressed by the symbolism, because it's very strong symbolism. The other thing I remember about that demonstration was there was this billboard about this big that had plastic bags with a lot of hairs, and basically the hairs were bush hairs, women's bush hairs, that were sent from different parts of the country, and they had stapled it on there, and it was supposed to be to demonstrate against Bush, President Bush, you know, keep your hands off my bush. It's kind of very creative, a little disgusting. But the point of that is to show you that there was a lot of passion already against Bush before September 11th. There was also a march about reparations that I went to in Washington, D.C. That wasn't a huge march, but there was a reparations march. And there was one other march that I think I went to. And I went to a peace action march in the summer that was about, it was the first peace demonstration I went to, because I had decided before September 11th that I wanted to get involved in the peace movement. And it was against recreating Star Wars, because I don't know if you remember, Bush had started talking about starting Star Wars back up. And I was like, this is ridiculous, so let me go out and protest this. So there was already a lot of rumblings and people being upset about President Bush's policies previous to September 11th. But then September 11th happened, and that changed everything for people in terms of politics. And what I would say to you is that the war became the easiest thing for people to rally around and critique President Bush on. That's not the same thing as people feeling, not to say people didn't like the war and they didn't have strong feelings about the war, but were they coming out because of the war? Unlike many of you who might have been coming out specifically because of the wars. I would say that the anti-war and peace movement was a way for people to express their anger and frustration in a consolidated way. And once President Bush wasn't in office anymore, there was no need for people to use that vehicle in the same manner. Another thing is, people, at least in the circles I think we travel in and what I call our natural allies, are not naturally angry, and they don't usually try to express themselves generally through anger all the time. So 7 years of being pissed off and being angry and being out in the streets can get a little tiring, you know? So another reason, see, these are cumulative reasons, there's just not one. Another reason why I think we're seeing a waning in the anti-war and peace movement is because people want to express themselves in a different way. They're like, oh my God, I can't just get out every day, year after year, and be angry. So I think that's another reason. Another reason, I think that people are proud of the United States of America and the fact that we elected an African American, a black person to office. I mean, that does say something enormous about democracy. The fact that we had the first woman who could have been elected to office, that says something enormous about our democracy. And people want to feel good about that, and I'm not mad at people for wanting to feel good about that. So I think that plays a role. I'm not sure how much, but I do believe that plays a role as well. I think something that plays a huge role is after 8 years of either trying to maintain your position in whatever your issue was, be it civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, abortion rights, whatever. Now you see somebody in office that you see as somewhat of an ally. Certainly on some particular issues, either you don't have to worry about having to protect the issue, or you might actually be able to make gains in the issue. Now people are, it's like, is it Pavlov's dogs, where you train them to do something and they do it over and over? What we've been trained to do is work together to put somebody in office, but as soon as they get in office, we break up into our little interest groups and get into our little lanes, and then we approach whoever's in office one by one, asking them, will you do this for me? Will you do this for me? Will you do this for me? And that's what we've done. We've broken up into those little segments, and now we're approaching the administration one by one, instead of using that power that was used to get the person in office and demanding across a broad coalition. We all want this. It's just not that I want this, we all want this. And we've been trained to do that, so that's another thing. That's something we have got to stop. We have got to not do that. And then what could possibly be the most important reason, or the overarching, is the economy. People are concerned about their jobs, or they're concerned about their friend, they're concerned about their future, and they're looking at those issues that they believe affect them the most at the moment when it comes to work, how they're going to eat. And they're not concerned, but you can't do everything. So I think all those things are the reason why we see less activism in the broader mass of people when it comes to the war. And what we're down to now is the hardcore, the true believers, the people who keep the movement alive, so when the next flaring up comes, there's actually an infrastructure, there's actually some philosophical underpinning, there's some place for people to go so they can express themselves again. That's what I'm thinking a lot of you are in this room. I'm certainly one of those people.